Welcome to Aging with Pride, the joys and WTFs about aging queerly. We're your hosts, Wendy and Debbie, and we're serving up a hot cup of wisdom with a splash of humor on the side. Think of us as your guides through the wilderness of aging queerly. So settle in and join us for episodes that prove that the best chapters of your life might just be the ones that you're writing now. Welcome to Aging with Pride podcast, where we talk about the joys and WTFs of aging queerly. I'm Wendy.
And I'm Debbie.
And we're your hosts. And welcome to episode 1, the pilot, where we talk about the joy of finding love later in life.
I love that because the podcast is about the joys and WTF. So it makes sense that we're starting on a joyful note. Right?
Yes.
So before we get into finding love later in life, I think it's important to talk about and introduce both of us a little bit about our history and then how we found love later in life.
I feel giddy.
You're giddy. I love it. Tell us a little bit about, I'd like to know, well, I know, but people might want to know who you are, how old you are. No, it's great. And a little bit about your history, about coming out, what that process looked like, how that was for you, anything you want to share.
Okay. Well, I'm 54. I've been out since I was 18.
18.
Yes, I came out in the Bible Belt of Texas in the late 80s.
What was that?
No better place to be or time to be coming out.
Well, really, you're laughing and joking about it, but seriously, what was that like to come out in a very conservative environment?
We were very closeted, and for fear of your safety, losing your job, losing your family, those kind of things.
Yeah, that's a big fear. And a very real fear because a lot of people, that's what happened.
And that fear exists still today for many people.
So you said you came out, but then you said you didn't come out. So what did that coming out look like for you?
Well, it was just me personally coming out, right? Like figuring out who I am. This is me. This is the me I was supposed to be all along.
So you didn't necessarily tell people?
No.
Okay, so
just only very
safe people.
Safe people.
So how did you know, if you can share, right? Like you said, I've came out to myself and realized this is who I am. This is who I'm supposed to be. What happened for you to feel that?
I kissed a girl and I liked it. That was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
One kiss.
One kiss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to share more about that? I love a juicy coming out story.
Let's just say my college experience lasted a lifetime.
So that was in college?
Was in college, yes.
You came out, you met somebody. Did you have any idea? Were you drawn to them or you weren't even aware of that?
Drawn to them. And I think probably a lot of people feel this way. I was drawn to them. I didn't know why or what, right? And then after we kissed, I sure knew why. And then I think a lot of people experience this. They are able to look back on childhood memories where you probably knew that all along and didn't know how to label it.
Right. And if you grew up in a place where you weren't allowed to label it and it wasn't discussed, then you certainly didn't know how to label it.
For me, I didn't even know what being gay meant when I was a young child. I didn't know what that was.
So did you date this person in college?
No.
So it was like, thank you. So grateful that you had that opportunity. Like you had that experience, which was life-changing for you, but you didn't date this particular person.
I did not.
But you dated other people.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. We're going to go there.
How about you?
Wait, I'm not done. I'm not done. Okay. Like she doesn't even know me. So you came out to yourself. You dated in college. You felt free. I know. I mean, you've shared that. You felt free and who you were meant to be. Did you come out to your family?
I did not. Not for a long while.
But when you did come out, what was that like? How did that happen? If you can share.
You heard this story yesterday and now you want to hear it again.
Because I think it's awesome.
I swore I would not come out to my family until they asked me. I felt like if they got to that point where they were asking me, they already knew anyway, and I was safe. Maybe that was a wimpy way to go about it, but here we are. And I was at my mom's house one day and back in the back bathroom, and she came in and asked me, and I was very much a captive audience and couldn't go anywhere.
So you were in the bathroom, but what I'm picking up on is you were on the toilet. You were going to the bathroom.
Yes.
And she came in at that moment and asked you if you were gay.
Yes.
I'm curious to know, maybe you've talked to her about this, maybe you haven't. What prompted her to do that? She obviously had been thinking about that might be the case.
Yeah.
Do you know what?
I don't know.
You don't?
No, I don't know.
Interesting.
It's very uncomfortable.
As it would be. When you're going to the bathroom, it's not really the time that you want to engage in most conversations, let alone that one.
No.
So you said?
I said yes, because I figured she already knew if she was asking me.
And then what happened?
And I did finish going to the bathroom.
I mean, did you have a conversation or did she just leave? It was like,
no, there wasn't a conversation.
And that was
I think
also
a lot of families in our generation didn't talk about a lot of things. Right?
Exactly, because you're 54 and I'm 57 and our parents, well, I know my parents were of that generation. You didn't talk about things like that. You didn't talk about religion, politics, sex, money, any of that.
We moved on. It went unspoken.
Okay.
And we went through some rough patches.
Do you want to share that or no?
I just think that's, when you're born and you live in a very, well, for me, in a very strict Christian household and church was our lives, right? Then I think there's probably a lot of feelings that our families go through, right? We go through our own journey and they also have to go through their own journey on what that looks like. And that's hard to let people know that, or are people going to ask questions, right? So I think there's...
Yeah. Do you think they had a lot of shame around it?
I would assume yes.
Okay.
I would guess. I think my family in general.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to switch it up a little bit and talk about, because I maybe should have asked you this earlier, but what do you do? I know what you do, but people who don't know you are meeting you for the first time.
Well, my first love is I'm a musician. Yes. And then I also have a full-time job to pay for being a musician. Yes.
I understand now what that means. Why you say that, right? You need a full-time job to pay for your love, which is being a musician.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're also in a band.
Yes.
And as a proud partner, I want to say your band has been together for 30 years.
Yes.
Which is, you don't hear that a lot.
It's a long-term relationship.
It's a very long-term relationship. And you have, which I love this, you have this soulmate connection with the lead singer in the band.
Very much so. Yes.
So you met Raina in college. Can you share a little bit about
She wasn't the kiss.
Okay. This is very good to know. She wasn't the kiss, because there are people who know both of you and probably thinking, was Raina the kiss?
We met in college in the music hall. She was an opera singer and going to opera classes, and I was going to a jazz rehearsal.
What instrument were you playing then?
Well, in jazz band, I was playing bass, but I'm sure that you want to get around to the other one that you like to bring up.
You play guitar in Dear Marcia.
Yes.
And you play bass in a jazz
I was a bassist
band and the symphony. And there's another instrument that people often see in the symphony that you played when you were younger. Yes. You don't bring it up a lot, but tell us about that instrument.
The French horn.
I'm here to tell you, one of the sexiest instruments in the entire symphony. And when we first met, I just want to refresh your memory. You were telling me about the French horn. And you said, and I quote, really the only thing it's good for is to announce a fox hunt.
Pretty much.
But that's not true.
No, it's used in many other uses.
Yes, I think it's great because you're so musically talented.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And you yourself are a self-identified band geek.
100%.
So, okay, you're in college. You're living your best gay life. You've said goodbye to the French horn at this point. Talk about maybe your evolution within the gay community. And if you want to share about relationships or things like that.
I think once I came out, I never looked back, right? That was it. And then, through that journey, and Raina and I started playing music, and we were never closeted with who we were through our musical journey. Almost all of my connections outside of my childhood family connections are from our music. That's how I'm connected to really everybody in my life.
Yeah.
And we've just always been out.
So let me ask you a question about relationships. Do you have some, and I know oftentimes, the best lessons that we learn from relationships are the most painful. So what are some lessons that you've learned that have kind of come out of painful experiences? Because that is part of the joy in it, right? That there's a lot of pain, but there's the joy of learning a lesson and being able to evolve from that is so valuable.
Oh boy. Yes. Well, I didn't really learn lessons. I thought I had learned lessons, but I didn't really learn lessons until I really started doing my own personal work and working on who I was, the things that were triggers for me, the things that were holdups for me, and why I ended up where I ended up. Right. And so
when you say why you ended up, do you mean why you ended up in the relationships you did? Or what do you mean?
Yes, and kind of how I've been molded and shaped and come to be who I am today. So for me, it was learning a lot about my inability to set boundaries and then my ability to create codependent spaces, right? And then learning how not to do that. So I don't really have good advice because
well, actually, you just gave good advice.
My only advice would be is to really do the deep work on yourself. And that's very hard. It's very painful and it's not easy. And I think it's easy to start it and get 2 or 3 sessions in with a great therapist and reach the point where you have to become very vulnerable with yourself. And
I think that's when people quit therapy.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
I know why, because that's when it gets hard.
Yeah, the first 2-3 sessions, it's like a marketing campaign, right? You're putting your best self and your therapist is learning you. And then, they really start to learn about who you are and start to ask the really hard questions and help you kind of navigate that terrain and dig deeper. And that's where I have met a lot of people who are like, yeah, no, we're going to talk about this when we met. And one of the things you said, but you are really a great example of someone who's done some really hard work.
It's a work in progress.
It is, yes. But you continue to do the work and you continue to make that a priority and for yourself.
Yes, it is very much a priority.
Which is great. And we're going to talk about that.
That's a whole episode in itself right there. Okay. Should we move on to you?
Oh, you're done? You're done being interviewed? That's fair.
I feel like we should share the space.
I love interviewing people though, but sure, we can move on.
I know. And you hate being in the hot seat.
I don't know. I'm busy. What time is it? I feel like I need a nap.
Let's talk about you.
Yes.
And your journey.
Yes.
And how you kind of ventured into
that space.
Discovering who you were. And
I came out a little bit later than you. I was probably maybe 24, 25. I had been married to a man. I will say I knew I was making a mistake when I walked down the aisle, but I didn't know why I was making a mistake. I couldn't tell you I made a mistake because I was a lesbian. That was not in my periphery, was not in my awareness. I just knew I was making a mistake. But once you're into the wedding planning, and I was raised Jewish and we were invested in this wedding and it was exciting. The way I've described it is like a roller coaster, right? It's slow, kind of ticking up. And that might be the point where you can get off a little bit safely. But then once it kind of crests and you go down, it's so fast. It's just full speed ahead. And that's really how I felt. And so I was married for 2 years, maybe 6 months, 4 days, 12 hours. Nobody's counting. Got divorced. And a friend of mine called me and said, I'm going to a lesbian bar. He was a trainer and he had been training these 2 women. And he said, do you want to come? And I said, absolutely. I'd love to come with you.
I'm assuming the 2 women he was training
they were a couple.
Oh, okay.
Yep. They were a couple.
Gotcha.
And so they had invited him out to the lesbian bar in Arizona. That's where I lived at the time. And I went out and I remember walking in with him and just something shifted for me. So when we left that night, I said to him, I'm coming back tomorrow.
Wait, let's go back to the shifted.
Sure.
What shifted? What did you go? Were you questioning? Were you curious? You thrown off?
Felt so comfortable in that space and almost felt like this feels like home. So I felt a comfort that I hadn't felt before. I said to him when we left, I'm coming back tomorrow alone. You're not coming with me. I don't want to be chaperoned. I go back the next night. I plop myself at the bar. I order Jack and Coke, light on the Coke. Just forget the Coke. Just Jack Daniels. I was drinking then. I'm sober now, but I was drinking then. And I remember just going, this is it. And I saw a woman on the dance floor who ended up being the first woman I kissed, the first woman I dated. It was like a scene out of a vampire movie, right? Vampire movies always have a scene where it's just, there's an intense connection and bam.
Okay, wait, let's pause. Let's go back to your first kiss.
With her? Yeah, I remember we kissed in the parking lot because that's obviously what you do after several Jack Daniels. And it was fireworks. I knew in that moment, why none of the relationships that I had had with men had ever worked out. And then we dated for a while and it was purely chaotic and very unhealthy and a terrible decision for both of us. But it was in that moment where I went, I get it. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's what's great. So yeah. So I went on then to, as you've had significant female relationships. I had significant female relationships. My coming out to my family was a little bit different. I knew I was getting ready to move in with my girlfriend and I refused for us to be roommates. I just that felt so
Meaning,
disrespectful. I didn't want to lie
right.
to anybody, and I didn't want to lie to my family, and I loved her, and I felt like out of respect for her and our relationship. So I remember asking my mom and dad if I could come over for dinner. It was just me. My siblings weren't there. And that dinner, it was going to be my coming out dinner. It took almost 3 hours because...
Was that a normal time frame for your
No,
dinners?
our family typically, historically, is eaten like a pack of rabid dogs. We are disgustingly fast eaters, except for my sister, she's the only normal, safe eating human in her family. Everybody else is just a constant choking hazard. But this dinner was 3 hours long because I was so just nervous and scared, even though I knew deep down inside my parents loved me. I have always said I was so lucky with my parents and how supportive they've been, but I was scared.
Yeah, of course. It's a very scary thing.
It's a scary thing. And like you said, and I experienced not with my family, but with good friends who came out and were completely cut off from their family.
Yes.
And they never were reconnected.
Right. And that is scary when you're going through it, especially if you're a close-knit family and your family is so rooted in your life.
Yeah.
That overcoming that fear is.
Because even though you know they love you, there was that risk.
Right.
What if? That unknown, what if? And so finally, I'm pretty sure my mother was just so over, like sitting at the kitchen table, and I think they knew what I was going to say. She said, honey, are you trying to tell us you're gay? Well, that's anticlimactic. I mean, thanks, Mom. So I said yes. And then we cried for maybe a variety of reasons, right? Relief. They were fearful. And then my mom said something that I just loved so much. And she said to me, okay, honey, one question. Yes. Who can we tell? And not because she was excited to go out and, get a megaphone, but she just wanted to ask permission. Who could know?
That's great.
And let me tell you something. Back then, my parents anyways, were not like, it's your story to tell. Nobody should, that's not how our family as a Jewish family worked. And I said to my mom, you may tell whomever you choose to, but just know I won't lie. Yeah. So if I'm in a situation with you and your friends and they ask me about my friend, I will be honest. So the next day I got a call from my grandmother, my nanny. I think my mom, that was the time where she was kind of really jazzed and learning about email. So I think there was maybe a group email that went out, and my nanny called me and just said to me, I love you exactly for who you are, and I will always love you.
Oh, that's amazing.
I know. I was very lucky.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
I love that for you, and that you felt supported.
Very supported. I was lucky. When my ex-wife and I had a ceremony, my father walked us both down the aisle.
Oh, that's amazing.
I know.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I was lucky.
It's great. I love that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now let's move down the road. Moving on down the road.
Moving down the road.
Tell us about what you do, because it's fascinating. It's interesting. And your story of how you got there is very interesting.
Yeah. So I had worked in nonprofits for many years, and then stayed at home to raise my kiddos. And then my ex one night just randomly said, I want a divorce out of the blue, which was shocking. Yeah, terrifying. And so I didn't really know what to do. So I tried to do something that I felt would kind of push me, and that was scary. And I tried stand-up comedy. That was in 2013. I fell in love with stand-up comedy. But more than that, I realized I fell in love with using humor as a way to educate and connect. So I started to create some education comedy shows. I was emceeing at the time. And then in 2016, wanted to figure out a way to combine my love of humor, my love of nonprofits, my love of connecting with audiences. So I went to auctioneering school. And so I've been a full-time auctioneer and MC. I do comedy whenever I'm asked.
I've seen you do comedy, and you're very funny.
I appreciate
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you. So
holding the audience right there.
Sometimes comedy is a full contact rough sport at times. I mean, you either hold the audience, or sometimes the audience wants nothing to do with you. Same for you in a band. It is absolutely so much crowd work for everything I do. You've experienced too. And we've talked about it, where you're in a room and, dear Marcia, that it's on fire.
It's fun.
Your night is just on fire.
And I think if you come to the stage, that's what you love to do, right? Like, you come with the passion already, and it's infectious. So people tap into that, what you're feeling.
You're creating an experience.
So let's go a little further.
Yes, further down the road.
And how we have ended up here today. The subject of our podcast. finding love later in life.
So I met Dear Marcia in 2014.
Yes.
I was emceeing a show on the Pride stage in Denver, Colorado, and Dear Marcia was the band. And we connected that way. You were married at the time.
Yes.
I was divorced at the time. I was dating. I was drinking. I was having a lot of fun. So we met, and it was professional, right? I met you and Raina, and then we went our separate ways. And as these things do, our community is small. Unless you have 42 million queer people in your community, your circles kind of cross. And so we would see each other again at events. I might MC. Dear Marcia was performing. I think you and a friend came to a comedy show.
Your sex com show.
So that's how universes swirled, but very periphery.
It's amazing that our circles didn't cross
more
somehow, somewhere in our past lives. But yes. And I remember after we did that Pride with you, Raina and I both were like, we want to work with Debbie someday down the road. And that's when we were putting together Women Who Rock the Rockies, a music festival. We were like, we need Debbie.
And what year was that?
That was 2022.
So what happened then?
Well, we were going to put on the first annual Women Who Rock the Rockies Women's Music Festival. And we reached out to you to MC it.
Yes. And it was amazing because I said yes. It was on Pride weekend. And I thought this is the perfect way to kick off Pride weekend with an all women's music event festival. I asked to be on a call with them because in my line of work, it's very important that when I get hired by somebody, I really know what their boundaries are, the parameters, where I can move, where I can't move with humor. I take that seriously. So I remember asking both of you, what did I ask?
You asked us, what are the parameters? What can I say? What can I not say? And we were like,
didn't even know what to say.
No.
Which is funny because if you've ever been to a Dear Marcia show, you know why that's a hilarious
Nothing is
question.
off limits.
Yeah.
Nothing.
But I did. And
yes, we all had a good laugh over it.
We did. And so I show up.
Yeah, we were at the event and both of us working. You were on target, making sure everybody was introduced, and you were so great entertaining the crowd. And we didn't know how to map out the night, and you were great just going along with the flow of it. We learned a lot of lessons that year. And then we were back in the side wings watching Melissa Crispo play.
She was great.
And we were kind of just chit-chatting what we could with the music going on. And then you grabbed my arm.
I grabbed her arm. There we go. We had a connection. I don't think either one of us knew what that was, what it meant, anything like that. You were newly divorced.
Yes.
You had been separated for a while.
Yep.
And I had been single for a while and extraordinarily happy being single and very content.
Yes.
So you and I did not have eyeballs in that direction.
No.
And then what happened?
And then I made sure that I was the one that reached out to you the next day to make sure that you got paid.
I love that.
I took that task off of Raina's hands. Instant message on Facebook. Oh, by the way, texting is much easier. Here's my cell phone.
And who fell for it? Hook, line, and sinker.
It was really the truth, though. It wasn't like a play.
Truth.
Yeah.
It was the truth.
Yeah.
Gave you my cell phone. We started texting, moved to Marco Polo, and have communicated daily, an embarrassing amount of times per day, every day since then.
I've noticed Marco Polo has a storage capacity, and now you have to start paying for that.
I think it's because
of us. We've eaten up all their bandwidth.
It's like the buffet does not work for certain people. I've had relatives who are like, we're going to the buffet. They're going to regret that decision, charging me $14 for all I can eat. And that's kind of what Marco Polo probably thought.
And we became very connected just through talking and found out that we're very aligned on so many things we like, our values, our
weird sense of humor.
Very weird sense of humor.
And you asked me out. I'm going to brag about this, brag on you.
Which I'm going to say was a very scary thing.
Of course it is. Let's talk about that for a moment. When you are single, you're out of a marriage, you're really working hard on yourself, on whatever. We're both probably also more shy than people think.
Yes, I'm not one to initiate that. So it was very outside of my comfort zone.
And I'm not either. I'm more of an introvert than anybody ever realizes it. And so you were brave and asked me out on a date.
I did.
And it was and will always be the most perfect first date ever.
I love that.
It was. She showed up at 10:30 in the morning. Her car was packed with all the things, all the provisions you might need.
Yes.
You got a camp spot up at Lake Wellington.
Mm-hmm.
And Had you been there?
No, it was a new experience for both of us.
We created this really great picnic area. We read to each other. We ate great food. We hiked to the waterfall. You were so incredibly thoughtful and heard everything I said. I got a ton of dietary issues. Everything that you had was so just great. And then we hiked to the waterfall and then we came back. It was a 10.5-hour date.
And I had learned that you love sunsets. I love sunsets. And so we had to sit at the lake and watch the sunset.
Out on a rock, watching the sunset.
Yes.
And what did you do?
I said, is this okay?
She has to hold my hand. I'm going to ask how often does that happen anymore? That kind of like sweetness, that's innocent, right?
I haven't been described as innocent very often in my life, so thank you for that.
But that was such a sweet gesture. I said yes, and then I'm not joking. We sat there like this, sweating.
Frozen.
Out my ass because I was nervous. You were nervous.
I didn't dare move, and I was so nervous that my hand was sweating because I was so nervous.
We are not the cool kids. Okay, let's be clear about that. So then we got in the car. I made the move, gave a first kiss.
Yes, you did. Thank you for doing that.
I'm pretty sure I almost shit my pants. I have IBS, and I am fairly certain that was a new trigger for me. But I didn't shit my pants, which is great news when you're on a first date.
Then we got home.
Yeah.
And we had an amazing
in my garage
kiss in your garage.
I call it the garage kiss.
Yes.
That was the kiss that kind of sealed the deal.
Was it?
Well, like for me, we had spent it was like over a month that we had just been talking. We didn't see each other, right? Because we both have kids and we have parenting schedules and life and work and all the things. And that was the kiss where I went, wow, I knew I liked you from all of our connections, all of our deep conversations. Then, hello.
I think that feeling was very mutual because I got in the car and wanted to scream like a little teenage girl.
I love that. I came in, called my friend, and I told him all about it. So that was lovely.
And then guess what we didn't do on our second date? We did not get a U-Haul.
We didn't get a U-Haul.
We did not get a dog.
Didn't get a dog.
We didn't get a kid.
No kids.
We didn't move in.
Didn't move in.
No. And lucky for us, we were both sober as well. So there was no alcohol infusing our decisions.
That's going to be an entirely different episode.
Yes.
Being sober in the queer community.
And dating sober and experiencing those things sober is,
I'm telling you,
scary.
It's a level of vulnerability that can be terrifying. The other thing is we didn't have sex right away.
No, we did not.
I don't know if that's too personal. I should have asked you if I could have said that, but here we are. It's a podcast and we want to be real. We did not have sex for a long time.
No, we didn't.
Because we were both so careful and wanted to be so sure and we were both working on ourselves. You were very clear, crystal clear. Your number one priority was doing your own work. And I just felt this deep attraction for that. I know you think it's funny, but like, I know how hard that is. So that was just a very attractive thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for supporting that and continuing to support that.
And we're almost 3 years and we still don't live together. As we kind of wrap this up and we think about, we have friends who are feeling just maybe alone or frustrated. They're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, beyond. They really would love to find someone to share their life with, and they haven't just met that person. What do you think are some things for them to remember?
What I say to that is my advice would be to stay tuned to our podcast because we will do an episode on how to make that happen.
We are going to do an episode on dating later in life for sure.
And now you want to stay tuned.
You do. I think for me, it was a matter, I had to become very comfortable being okay, being alone, living physicality alone, but being single. And I was so at peace with that. I had really great friends who provided everything I felt I needed, right? Except for a sexual intimacy, right? But we had a deep intimacy as friendships do. And then I was doing a lot of that hard work.
Yeah, the hard work. And you feel good when you see the product of that work.
So, well, thank you for having this conversation.
Thank you.
Talking about finding love later in life, which it is possible. Can't wait to see you for episode 2. Bye. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Aging with Pride. Whether you are in your 40s or your 80s and beyond, we are here for every glorious chapter. Please find us on social media, YouTube, and wherever you stream your favorite podcasts at Aging with Pride Podcast as we keep the community conversation going. And remember, getting older isn't about fading away. It's about aging forward with pride. See you on the next episode.